So Europe is obviously facing a load of different problems right now. First and foremost, we have the problem with natural gas prices, the supply of natural gas, and just energy security in general. We have a failing central bank that is fundamentally incapable of fixing its problems because the tools that it has at its disposal just aren't sufficient here. And then finally, we have an economy on the precipice of a massive recession that, again, there's just no real way around. Of course, it would be easy to say that this is all entirely Europe's fault, but actually, in fairness, it isn't. Now, the first major reason for these problems certainly is. It was gross money printing, irresponsible monetary and fiscal policy, and basically bad governance that the entire continent of Europe saw for the best part of 2.5 years. But the other major problem here is, of course, Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Europe's decision to stand against that, which does make perfect sense in the world of geopolitics and really can't be faulted. These are, though, all ever-evolving situations and they are incredibly fluid, but unfortunately, they don't seem to be de-escalating and actually, they seem likely to continue to go in the wrong direction here. There are, though, two very big problems that Europe is facing, which it's likely prudent to pay attention to this week, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about in this video. So the first really important thing is, of course, natural gas that's obviously very volatile right now, because sometimes as much as 50% of the natural gas that's burnt and used in Europe comes directly from Russia. Now, Europe obviously doesn't like Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Why would they like that? And so they want to punish Russia for this action. Russia, though, is not sitting down and taking this all on the chin. Why would they? They're going to defend their own interests as well, and so they're fighting back. Now, how are they doing this? Well, mostly by putting uncertainty behind the amount of natural gas that they're exporting into Europe, putting the price of natural gas into absolute chaos because speculators and investors just don't know how much natural gas is going to be available in the future. We actually just saw a fourth consecutive rise in the price of natural gas across Europe, which means one entire year of energy costs rising day after day. Now, the big risk that we were talking about and that everyone was paying attention to last week was Nord Stream 1, the massive undersea pipeline that supplies much of Germany and a large portion of Europe's gas as a whole, and the fact that it was shut down for scheduled maintenance by Russia, and there was a massive fear that it would just never reopen again. In the end, the pipeline did actually reopen, but unfortunately, it was only at 40% capacity, and Russia has recently continued to hint that that level may fall into the future and that it might not stay that high. Russia are now making further threats, this time that another turbine needs repairing, and while allowing it to be replaced would be a violation of Europe's own sanctions that they put in place against Russia, just like they did last week, they would be more than happy to just ignore that, to turn a blind eye and keep getting their cheap gas for as long as possible. Essentially, Russia is using Europe's reliance on natural gas as ammunition to fight back against the sanctions that Europe put in place in the first place. For this situation in particular, as you can see from this article, Russia has warned that any further sanctions against them may weigh on how much gas they supply to Europe. The turbine will be installed after all technological formalities have been completed, and the flows will be at the levels that are technologically possible. The situation, though, may change if Europe continues its course of absolutely recklessly imposing sanctions and restrictions. Now, that kind of rhetoric makes it quite clear, in my opinion, that the limitation of natural gas isn't really related to what is technologically possible, but what is geopolitically possible, as in how much Russia actually wants to give Europe because they aren't too happy with their behavior. Any further sanctions put into place by the EU will without a doubt result in less natural gas being piped on over, and that will ripple across the rest of the European economy. Now, the EU is doing what it can. It's trying to import as much natural gas from other places in the world, but that's a very difficult and slow process. And they're also trying to put into place a new rule which would encourage basically every EU country to reduce the amount of natural gas they use by 15% within the year. As of yet, though, this law actually represents a massive opportunity for the EU to grow its power and grow its bureaucracy, because if they declare a state of emergency about natural gas on the continent, this would become a mandatory proposal, and these countries would lose that sovereign right to determine their own gas consumption. As a result of this, some countries, particularly the southern countries, aren't too happy with this, and they don't want to prohibit and give up their own sovereignty purely to save Germany's economy. For now, it appears that Russia really is holding the EU at gunpoint and that they hold all the cards in this debate. Now, why is this actually so important, though? When you think of natural gas consumption, you probably, like me, think of burning food on a hob or a gas-fired boiler, heating your home and something like that. And to be honest, we're actually in a little bit of a heat wave right now across Europe, so this shouldn't be a major problem. Of course, though, natural gas is also used extremely heavily just to generate electricity, and that's where most of these problems stem from. Every business and every home and almost every single person in the West uses electricity, and prices have of course soared as natural gas prices rose in the first place. Now Germany is the powerhouse of the EU. Their economy is monstrous and easily dominates the rest of the continent, especially when it comes to manufacturing, which is a notoriously energy intensive process. Now, of course, if you pay attention to this channel and you've seen my videos before, you'll know that I already think that most of Europe is actually in this recession and it's been a long time coming, but the rest of the world is finally catching up with this idea and the data is finally starting to show it as well. For example, we just got business confidence levels outside of Germany and they are almost as low as the absolute worst point during the pandemic crash when every business in the world was shutting down and we weren't sure what was going to happen next. This is now the worst we've seen it in over 2 years. Germany is on the brink of a recession. High energy prices and the threat of gas shortages are weighing on the economy. Companies are expecting significantly worse business activity in the coming months. Essentially, businesses are sensing some kind of recession. They're seeing less customers come through their doors, they're seeing less spending from their competitors, and they're seeing their debt servicing costs rise as well. But businesses are also actually creating this recession themselves, because when they get worried about the future, when they sense that things aren't looking so good, they reduce their own investment into the future. They pay out less bonuses and smaller salaries to their staff, and they slow hiring or even go on to lay off staff to protect themselves as a recession really kicks in, meaning that more often than not, this kind of data, when it turns negative, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Business confidence is an absolutely hugely important figure, and it isn't just as simple as people's feelings as a lot of detractors would like to suggest. Obviously, if Russia goes on to limit the gas production and their gas supply to Europe further, this situation is only going to deteriorate as well. Finally then, we have the problem surrounding the European Central Bank and the fact that usually they would be looked to solve this kind of crisis, but at this point they just don't have a chance. Now, of course, they were extremely late to the party on inflation and interest rate raises in the first place, which was entirely their fault. They do hold blame for this issue in particular. This was 100% avoidable, and they now find themselves stuck in between a rock and a hard place. They can essentially either raise rates and push the economy into a recession and also cause a new debt crisis in some southern countries like Italy, or they can let inflation run wild, which will of course go on to crash the economy anyway. This is no easy decision, and it's absolutely been made worse by the year of inaction by the European Central Bank. It does now seem though that they've actually chosen which side they're going to be going for, and they're choosing to crash the economy by raising rates. Robert Holtzman, part of the Governing Council of Europe, said that they will probably have to endure a recession to curb inflation. He did also make the caveat that hopefully it won't come to that, but frankly, we all know it's too late, it's already here, and the only way to bring inflation back down to anything close to reasonable levels is to hike rates. Now that was actually supposed to be the end of this video here, but in the 3 hours or so it took me to prepare to actually go forward and film this video, it's already become outdated. Now Russia was threatening to reduce Nord Stream 1's pipeline gas by about 50% to cut it in half back down to 20% of its capacity, but that's no longer a threat because Russia have literally just done that. The amount of gas flowing through this pipeline is now half of what it was yesterday, and as I mentioned earlier, this makes up for about 50% of natural gas supply in a number of different European countries, including, unfortunately, Germany. Now, Russia are claiming that this is for their maintenance, but really, everyone and their mum knows that this is posturing and this is part of the geopolitical game. Now, gas prices spiked by 10% within 5 minutes of this news coming out, and that's after already rising 5% yesterday alone on the fears that this kind of thing might happen. Maybe Russia is using this as leverage to try and seek the removal of some sanctions, but really, at this point, it's very hard to say. All we actually have to go off is the stuff that Russia is physically telling us, and as we know from this past year, Russia is rarely, if ever, a reliable source, and they're more than happy to lie on the world stage. It's also worth noting that oftentimes chaos in Europe is its own reward for Russia. Maybe they can't necessarily stimulate their own country to grow and expand, but they can reduce the effectiveness and the efficiency of those enemy states nearby, meaning Europe. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to bless the YouTube algorithm. It really does help. If you want to join our exclusive community, then check out our Patreon. You get access to our Discord server and extra content like access to my portfolio and buy and sell alerts for all my own investments. Also, make sure to check out the link in the description to Masterworks. It can help you protect your portfolio against market turmoil through fractional shares of art from world-famous artists. Art has historically proven to be uncorrelated to the markets, so it's a really valuable resource with the markets falling every week. There's also a link in the description to I Trust Capital, which helps you to invest in crypto through your tax-advantaged IRA, which could literally save you thousands. If you, like me, think crypto going down is a buy-in opportunity, then now is the perfect time to join I Trust Capital. Thank you all for watching. Stay stoic. Until next time.